Hi, Acadiana. I'm Meteorologist Dave Baker. Happy Friday to you. I know a lot of folks are ready for a weekend after a long work week. Very hot temperatures still outside here today, but we are going to be talking about our newly formed potential tropical cyclone number 4 that is expected to become a tropical depression sometime in the next 24 to 36 hours, and then probably becoming a tropical storm, which that would get the name Debby, coming up here in a couple of days or so. And right now it looks like most of the action is going to be affecting Florida. So we'll get to that in just a little bit. I want to take a look outside real quick. Still on the hazy side, still have some Saharan dust that's out there, and the Saharan dust, I have to say, produced some pretty spectacular sunset conditions late yesterday evening. And the haze is out there once again. The temperatures are quite hot once again. Temperature here in Lafayette 94 with a dew point of 76, and that sets your heat index at 107 degrees. Don't forget there is a heat advisory in effect, and we could see some heat index values going as high as 112 degrees later today. Not a great chance for any showers or thunderstorms. We did have a couple of widely scattered showers and thunderstorms that were along the coast very early this morning, but you can see generally the radar is clear this afternoon. Still can't rule out one or two isolated showers popping up with the daytime heating, but most of us are going to stay just hot and humid for most of the afternoon. So let's get right to it and look at the tropical weather outlook. Of course, potential tropical cyclone number 4 has been designated now by the National Hurricane Center, and this potential tropical cyclone thing is relatively new. It's only been around for about the last 4 years. Prior to issuing these potential tropical cyclone advisories, the National Hurricane Center was not actually issuing watches or warnings until you had an actual tropical depression. And sometimes these are forming in an area that's going to be affecting land within 36 to 48 hours. So it really wasn't enough time to put out those watches and warnings. So the solution here was to go ahead and do potential tropical cyclone. That way the advisories can go ahead and be initiated and watches and warnings can be posted with a timely manner, giving folks that 24, 36, 48 hour window before a tropical system were to affect them. So even though 4 is not officially a tropical system just yet, some of the watches and warnings have already been posted for the coastlines of Florida. So let's take a look at it here on the satellite imagery. And where we're looking here is basically over southeastern Cuba. This is the region that we're watching. In fact, we've been watching this now for a little over a week. Really wasn't showing up well as a tropical wave as it moved across the Atlantic Ocean, but the models have been biting on this for quite some time. And we always know that as we get into the first part of August that most of the time you are going to be seeing at least some tropical development out there. Looking a little bit closer, this is the 1 minute interval satellite, so it's a little bit slower there, but you're seeing every single minute. Eastern Cuba, there is maybe a little bit of a low-level circulation, or let's say at least lowering of pressures there along that tropical wave, and it is moving off toward the west at about 15 or 16 miles per hour. So you can see the Florida Keys are right here, and the area that we're watching is right over here. So again, when you put that tropical cyclone, that potential tropical cyclone designation in, it gives the folks there along the Florida Keys and the South Florida coast at least an official watch or an official warning, and they can start to take action with their hurricane evacuation plans or whatever they may be doing in order to secure everything for a tropical system to move through. So this is the latest on potential tropical cyclone number 4. It's the advisory that came down at 10. Because those watches and warnings are up, we will get advisories on this every 3 hours. Now, the forecast cone that you're seeing here comes every 6 hours. So we won't get a new forecast cone until 4 o'clock later this afternoon, but we will get updates on the position, the wind speeds, and the movement every 3 hours because those tropical storm watches and warnings have been posted. So we've got tropical storm watches for the Florida Keys, as well as the Gulf Coast of Florida stretching from about, it looks like, Fort Myers to the north of Tampa, and then from around the southern tip of Florida up to around Fort Myers, it looks like we've got that tropical storm warning. So I do have the link in the description for the Tropical Cyclone number 4 page. So if you want to click on that, you can get all of the specifics. You'll be able to read the discussion. You'll be able to see this map that I have here. You'll also be able to get the details on all of the watches and warnings there. So that is in the bottom description here of this video if you want to check that out. Meanwhile, the models, for the most part, have been pretty consistent. And I did want to remind you once too that all of the information, the current information of potential tropical cyclone number 4 is over here on the left-hand side, and that will update as we go through time. So if we do a Let's Talk Tropics over the weekend, which right now doesn't look as likely because the track is so far away from Acadiana, but if that were the case, you would see that changing there on the left-hand side. But there, look at the general models. These are basically your main hurricane models, and you can see they're pretty much lined up within the cone from the National Hurricane Center, and the GFS ensembles have all kind of squeezed together quite a bit from yesterday. Remember, the GFS had some crazy tracks and some stalls going on, but now it looks like that trough that's north of the area may open up enough to be able to pull this thing away and steer it maybe back out into the Atlantic Ocean. And in fact, I think it has a better chance of becoming a hurricane once it moves over the Atlantic and then starts to shoot its way off toward the Canadian Maritimes. And there's a look at the JEPS ensemble model tracks. And again, they have all kind of squeezed together too, a lot more compared to what we were seeing yesterday. Something that has changed, though, is some of the guidance on the intensity. And again, I will remind you, track forecast is much, much easier than intensity forecast because there's just so many different variables on what could strengthen or what could weaken a hurricane or a tropical system. Sometimes you just don't see some of the things that are out there as well. But on the model intensities here, you can see that really going out to about 5 days, which is right there, generally most of the models are keeping this as a tropical storm. And I will say that most of the models going out to about day 3 and day 4 are keeping it somewhere either over the Gulf of Mexico off the west coast of Florida. This particular part of the model is probably when it would be over land because it's a forecast to cross over Florida. And then when you see these models up here with the possibility of this being a Category 1 or Category 2, that's farther out in the forecast period, but that's more than likely going out into the Atlantic. But I will say that there's a couple of the models that are right here up to Category 1 hurricane as it's still over the Gulf of Mexico, over the west coast of Florida. And there's some things that are going in its favor that I'm not surprised that we're seeing numbers this high at that time period, and it has to do with the water temperatures and also the tropical cyclone heat potential. So as we've been studying pretty much throughout the hurricane season, we've already known that our water temperatures have been sky high. 30 to 31 degrees Celsius is anywhere between 86 and 88 degrees. So our low is right there right now, and it's forecast to kind of go like that. So the entire time, at least when it comes to visit Florida and before it moves off toward the northeast, it's going to be moving over extremely warm waters, anywhere between, let's say, 84 to 88 degrees. So plenty warm to sustain any kind of tropical system and also can help it strengthen as well. Now, right now, it looks like the main low pressure area is over land. So once it starts to get more over water, I think it'll be able to use that more as the fuel. Now, the tropical cyclone heat potential is the measure of the 80-degree water at the surface, but also how deep that goes. So if a tropical system is moving in this area or even this area here, when it churns up the waters that are below, because when these tropical storms and hurricanes move over the water doesn't stay smooth. We talk about these huge waves that are created by some of the winds there. But when you're out here in these cooler waters, sometimes it can churn up some of that colder water, and the tropical system can't intensify because it's just not getting the premium fuel that it needs. But when it's over here around the Caribbean Sea and the eastern part of the Gulf of Mexico, those heat potential numbers are sky high. They are right off the charts there. So a tropical system that's moving over this area would basically be running over super premium fuel, and it'll use it. And a lot of times in the eastern Gulf of Mexico and the western part of the Caribbean, we have seen developing tropical depressions or tropical storms really fire up into a big hurricane. It doesn't take long. If the atmospheric conditions are good, it doesn't take long for a lot of these tropical systems to really spin up into something serious. And that's why when you look at these intensity models, it's not out of the question that you're going to see something getting into hurricane strength maybe between 3 and 5 days, even when it's still not in the best place for any kind of development. So it really has the water temperatures going in its favor. And I'll say the wind shear where this low is currently developing really isn't in a very hostile environment. There's some moderate wind shear here to the north. Wind shear is fairly low as you go off toward the west into the eastern part of the Gulf of Mexico, but there are some indications that there's going to be a little bit more shear maybe in this area come about 2 to 3 days down the road. So that might be the inhibiting factor when it comes to development with Debby, or what we think will be Debby before it starts to cruise in that direction. So if the wind shear stays low, it'll have a much better chance for firing up. And I know there's a lot of folks there on the southwestern coast of Florida. Hurricane Charlie, that was a number of years ago, spun up into a strong Category 4 very, very quickly and was devastating areas around Port Charlotte and down toward Fort Myers as well. So it is something that we're concerned about because there still is the chance we could see some rapid development. So what we're seeing on the forecast intensity models as a moderate tropical storm could easily be a Category 1 hurricane. So let's go through the different models and see what's going on individually. And what we're going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and take you through Tuesday morning. So we're going to focus on the low moving into the Gulf and then making that crossover over central or northern Florida. We're not going to focus as much as it goes out into the Atlantic Ocean. One, because it's not as much of a concern for us, but two, I think once it starts to move out of the way, there might be some other things that we might need to pay attention to. We do not want to take our eye off of everything that's out there. But the Euro model, which earlier in the week was very consistent with a system staying in the Atlantic and curving this way, was also considerably stronger. And over the last couple of days, as track has shifted a little bit farther toward the west, the center of low pressure has been generally weaker. Big rainmaker for much of Florida and southern Georgia, but as far as the intensity, the Euro model really has backed off on anything being super strong. So let's go ahead and look at the Canadian model too. And the Canadian model pretty much was following the Euro early on in the forecast period. And then it kind of went off with the GFS that was focusing more on a Gulf of Mexico type of system for a long time. But the Canadian model has a much faster movement off toward the northeast and maybe a stronger type of system, especially as it gets out closer to the Atlantic Ocean. The Icon model is very, very similar to the other two, but it is a lot more intense as it kind of curves around and tries to move over Florida. So it might be thinking that it's going to tap into some of this very high heat potential type of water that's out off the Gulf of Mexico. So there's a possibility between now and Tuesday, we could have a stronger tropical system moving across the central and northern part of the Florida Peninsula. So let's look at the GFS, and the GFS is the one that's pretty much been the most consistent when it comes to something over the Gulf of Mexico. And then at least earlier in the week, it was wandering its way all over the place. But the last couple of days, it's pretty much gotten its act together with it kind of moving off toward the northeast, similar to what every other model is saying right now. But it does show a fairly strong tropical storm moving onshore around Tampa and then heading off toward the northeast and maybe strengthening a little bit more as it goes farther out into the Atlantic Ocean. Now, the reason why I am going only through Tuesday morning is because we think that whatever this is going to be, let's say it's Debby, is going to be making its way away from the United States and definitely not a threat to Louisiana. So we're in good shape there. But it is August, and there's something that just kind of caught my eye in the last couple of model runs. So I'm going to show you the GFS model starting at the end of this and going through August the 14th. And what do you see there? A tropical system, a fairly strong tropical system in the Gulf of Mexico. It kind of caught my eye earlier because it was pushing something toward the southern Texas coast, kind of coming out of here and then going in this direction. And this is a second model run that is now have something developed maybe over the Western Caribbean. and then heading a little bit closer to home, which is a bit unnerving. But again, this is way far out. This is still, 12 days away. So many changes are going to happen between now and then. But because it is August, that's why I say always keep your guard up, because anything can spin up. So as we have one system kind of moving out of the way, there's the potential we could have another one coming in from the southwest. Not set in stone at all, but it is something to continue to watch. And whenever you have something coming over into the western part of the Gulf of Mexico, we tend to get a lot more concerned. But I'll let you know at least this model here, which is fresh off the presses in the last hour or so, and the previous model run brought it over deep South Texas. So we've got a little bit of consistency here, but we've got a lot of time to watch this just in case we have something else that might develop. So right now, let's go ahead and look and see if there is anything else to be concerned with. You can see right now on the Gulf of Mexico satellite that it is a beautiful day. You got some of the moisture from potential tropical cyclone number 4 starting to enter here stage right, and still have a bit of Saharan dust that is kind of moving its way up the coast, and we saw that yesterday with some hazy skies, and we'll probably see a little bit more of that today. For our friends who are doing some fishing or boating or working out in the offshore waters, you've got a gorgeous day out there. And the wind speeds are light and variable, and the seas are running about 1 to 2 feet in the nearshore waters and about 3 to 4 feet in the offshore waters. So really not a bad day when it comes to the Gulf of Mexico. Now things will probably get a little rougher as our tropical system moves off to the east, but I don't think it's going to have a big impact on our waters over the western part of the Gulf of Mexico. So let's look at the Central American satellite, and remember a few days down the road, or 12 days down the road, we're probably going to be watching this particular area for the possibility of some development, just because the GFS is starting to suggest something there. But I don't think anything is imminent here across Central America over the next couple of days. And as far as the tropical Atlantic satellite, we've got a number of tropical waves that are out there. Nothing that is really showing up on with the National Hurricane Center, but that area about 12 days from now that would start here and move off toward the northwest here, according to the GFS model, perhaps could be this wave that's over the central part of the Atlantic Ocean. So that is something we'll be watching. And the computer models have done pretty good this year, especially the extended, not necessarily saying exactly where a tropical system is going to be, but right there, maybe the last few days of July 25th, 26th, there was some pretty good indications that the tropics were going to wake up somewhere in this area, and it did happen, and it is happening right now. So that's why we'll watch this, and we'll also watch another wave that's coming off the eastern in the eastern Atlantic here, off of the African coast, and I think we're going to see more of these tropical waves working their way off. And the more they move across, the more they're going to erode some of this Saharan dust, as well as the dry air that's currently over the northern part of the Atlantic Ocean. So right now, not too concerned about potential tropical cyclone number 4, but don't let your guard down, because there might always be something coming up right behind it. Let's just for fun look at the Pacific satellite once again. You've got Carlotta, which is out here in the Pacific Ocean. It is currently a hurricane with winds at 80 miles per hour. And that is going to continue to move off toward the west. Some potential for some development here, and also some potential for some development here. Now remember, we've talked about El Nino and La Nina over the last several weeks or so. And during an El Nino season, you have a lot of activity in the Pacific and less activity in the Atlantic. And we're now moving into a La Nina period, and it appears that the Atlantic Ocean normally would see more, but the Pacific Ocean would see less. And we're actually seeing kind of what we would consider a La Nina season, because Carlotta here is only the third named storm we've had in the Pacific. And by the time you reach the first week of August, most of the time you have already seen at least 6 or 7 named storms, and several of those have become hurricanes. So definitely it looks like an El Nino type of pattern there over the Pacific Ocean this time around, with limited numbers numbers of named storms compared to what we've seen over the past several years, especially when you have an El Nino season. But again, keep in mind, August is a very busy month. These next 9 to 10 weeks are the busy season here for the hurricanes, and about 70 to 80% of all tropical storms and hurricanes will happen in an average season between now and about the 15th of October. So busy times ahead. Forecasts are still calling for a very busy season, even though we're still in that neutral zone between El Nino and La Nina. Most of the forecast models are still saying we're going to at least move into a minor La Nina period, which of course would increase the chances for more storms over the Atlantic Basin. And also during the month of August, you can see just about the entire Atlantic Basin is open for business. And a lot of times you get these tropical waves that come across, and you get some development there near the Leeward and Windward Islands, and also the Gulf of Mexico. The western part of the Gulf of Mexico is a fairly big hotspot when it comes to tropical development. So something that we will be watching, especially as we go into the next week or so. But real quick review there, potential tropical cyclone number 4, 20.9 north, 76.6 west, winds are 30 miles per hour, and the pressure down to 1012. Of course, we'll get that next advisory coming up at about 1 o'clock. Usually comes down about 10 to 1 or so. And I will update all of that on my social media pages. So if you want to check those out, please do so. And also, again, below in the description of this video here, there's a lot of links down there where you can click on different computer models, try to work on your own forecasts, but you'll also have the page that specifically covers potential tropical cyclone number 4, and that'll give you all of the information if you want to read what the National Hurricane Center's thinking is, especially with that discussion. It gives you a better idea of what they think and what they think of the models, and it's a great tool to have when you're trying to build your own forecast as tropical season, hurricane season really gets going here over the next several weeks. Well, I hope you enjoy Let's Talk Tropics. I enjoy hanging out with you each and every weekday afternoon here for lunchtime. If you do, please like the video, subscribe to my channel, and also turn on those notifications. Right now, I am not planning on doing lives of Let's Talk Tropics over the weekend, but if something changes or the models start to shift a little bit closer, might change my mind and might do something over the weekend. Probably not tomorrow, but maybe on Sunday. But I really enjoy everybody hanging out with me and learning a little bit more about tropical weather and how things work and where things go, how the models work, and what the National Hurricane Center thinks of all of this. Well, I hope you all have a great weekend. Try to stay cool. It's going to stay hot out there. I'm Meteorologist Dave Baker, and I'll see you on Monday.